A lot of the vehicles which pop up in older racing games under the unicorn category tend to be cars that you can kind of be a bit hit or miss with. They're not necessarily cars which will break the bank, if you want to look at it that way as far as performance goes. They might be good, but generally speaking, they tend to be as good as many of their rivals, or just a little bit under par, but beloved because they have that special place in many people's hearts. However, there are some which actually do deserve to return, or, even if they don't return, are worth going back to older racing games just to experience those cars. And for me personally, and I would say for many people as well, maybe even those who don't know how good this car is, this is one of those occasions where it's worth your while, basically, to go back to Project Gotham 3 in particular, to experience this car again, or, if you've never driven it, for the first time. Now, you can drive this car immediately, as soon as you go into the game in arcade mode. It has a quoted price of 200 grand if you do choose to buy it in the main game, which is still actually a very good price. That's a lot cheaper than many of the other exotics, less than half the price of a Koenigsegg CCR, for instance, and also cheaper than, for instance, the Dodge Viper Carbon, the SRT10. So it's very well placed as far as pricing goes, but what you actually get for that, because this car, the Callaway C7, is not an exotic which many people talk about. And from one perspective, you can kind of understand that, because Callaway, they're a company which I have a lot of love for. I love a lot of their models. The C12 is my absolute favourite, but they are known in a similar way to Roof with Porsche for being a Corvette-based company. They tune up Corvettes, they make kind of coach-built bodied versions of Corvettes with more power and better performance. And they do, again, like Roof and some other companies, occasionally make a more bespoke car. The C12, for instance, is a much more bespoke vehicle than, say, just a modified Corvette. And this is another perfect example of that, because this car, the Callaway C7, is not based on a Corvette in any way. In fact, it shares no components whatsoever with a Corvette, even though you'd probably assume, understandably so, that it would. For instance, that would be like Roof making a car which has nothing whatsoever to do with a Porsche. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but it would be kind of surprising given that that's what they're known for. Now, this car is very much a GT1 car for the road. Literally, it is a GT1 car for the road. There are two of them in existence, and it actually debuted at a race, the Daytona 24-Hour Endurance in 1997, and it even led the race up until about the 12-hour mark, so roughly halfway through, in other words, but unfortunately it had to retire due to electrical failure, which is unfortunate, and then it wasn't able to come back because they changed homologation rules, and so the car was no longer eligible. And that's a shame. It had a very short-lived life as far as racing goes, but in that time it made a quiet but sure name for itself. It's not a car which a huge amount of people talk about, in a very similar way to some of the others which we talk about in these series and in others on the channel too, such as Unsung Heroes, for instance. But more often than not, those cars which do have kind of a short spark of life, but then don't get talked about much after that, do show a lot of promise. And that is exactly what this car does, because the engine is a 6.8 litre, so pretty big, a lot bigger than a Corvette of the time. They would have been around a 5.7, for instance, in the C5 generation, putting out just under 660 horsepower. That's pretty good. Now, the weight on this car could go either way. It could be really good, or it could just look really good. So it could be like a 1,200 kilo car, maybe even more. But no, on Project Gotham 3, it weighs 1 ton. Exactly 1 ton, 1,000 kilos. And, of course, that's a European ton, not an American one. There's a big difference between the two. Now, the horsepower per ton is pretty easy to work out. 1,000 kilos, 659 horsepower. It's got 659 horsepower per ton. And that is a superb level to be working at. In fact, that's actually a lot better than many of the other GT1 road cars from the 90s. How cool is that? It's a car which nobody talks about, and yet it's superior to a lot of its rivals. Everyone knows about the Elise GT1, the CLK GTR, the 911 GT1, the Nissan R390, and of course, the mighty Toyota TS20 road car, and yet people don't talk about this one. But the reality is, it actually has a better horsepower per ton than many of those cars do. That's quite impressive. Now, what about its actual performance? Well, on Project Gotham 3, you're looking at about 205 miles per hour flat out, and that's pretty accurate to real life because the car is very powerful and designed to be, of course, fast, but at the same time, in a similar way to cars that would come later, like the Gumper Apollo or the Mosler MT900, it has a lot of downforce aids to help it around the track. Massive rear diffuser, big rear wing, chin splitter at the front end. It's very much so designed to be a cornering machine, at least as much, if not more so, than a straight line machine. Whereas it's, to be honest, not difficult to make a fast car in a straight line. Plenty of companies have done it. Making a car that can go fast in a straight line and take a corner, that is an entirely different challenge, and that is where this car's strength really arises. And it's a shame to me that this car is not featured in, for instance, Project Gotham 4. As far as I'm aware, at least, it's not on that game, because this on Project Gotham 3 reminds me in a funny way of something like a Caparo T1 on Project Gotham 4. Now, this isn't quite as quick as that car, because that's essentially a Formula 1 car for the road, which is just a whole different level of vehicle, but the reason why it reminds me of that is because, like the Caparo, it's a vehicle which feels way too good to even be a road car. It feels so ridiculously OP in the best possible way, because this is a car which, as we already covered, people don't talk about, and many people don't even know that this car exists. It's a totally uniquely styled car. It's kind of similar to a Panoz, but at the same time not really. It's very much its own thing. I personally love the style of it. You can definitely tell that it was a privateer company that designed the car, because it has, in a similar way to a Mosler, a style which is very much form follows function. It's designed first and foremost to be competitive, and then whether or not it's pretty is secondary to that. Now, personally, I think it's a great looking car, but at the same time, especially from, for instance, the back, I could understand why people maybe don't like the look of this car. For some people, at least. It does have a very bare bones kind of style, let's put it that way. It looks very much so like what it is, just a car that's designed to win races. So, from that point of view, it's exactly like a Mosler, that race car for the road, and just like a Mosler, it's really good, because on this game, Project Gotham 3, it's a force to be reckoned with. It's a car which is certainly worth checking out, and the handling is excellent on this car. So if you do get a chance to go back and play it, this is for sure a highlight. So that's it overall for this particular pick. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.